and it's going to be another busy week for the courts as they continue to sentence those who took part in riots and disorder across England and Northern Ireland in the wake of the Southport attacks 2 weeks ago. So far, police have arrested more than 779 people. They've charged more than 349 and 118 are now behind bars. On Friday, the first prison sentences for encouraging unrest on social media were handed down to three men: Tyler Kay, Richard Williams and Jordan Parler. 58-year-old Derek Drummond has been given the longest sentence so far. He's now serving 3 years for violent disorder and for assaulting a police officer. Teenagers as young as 15 have also received sentences, while 18-year-olds James Nelson and Bobby Sherburn were imprisoned for 2 months and 20 months, respectively. Well, yesterday, the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police, Serena Kennedy, spoke at the funeral of Alice da Silva Aguiar, one of the 3 girls who was killed in Southport.
You have shown great courage in asking me to be here today, to speak, to give a message from you, Alice's family, to say that you do not want there to be any more violence on the streets of the United Kingdom in the name of your daughter. I am ashamed and I'm so sorry that you've had to even consider this in the planning of the funeral of your beautiful daughter, Alice. And I hope that anyone who has taken part in the violent disorder on our streets over the past 13 days is hanging their heads in shame at the pain that they have caused you, a grieving family.
We are joined now by Nazir Afzal, former Chief Crown Prosecutor for the North West of England, and by the Chair of the Criminal Bar Association, Tana Adkin. Morning, both of you. Tana Adkin, if I could come to you first of all. We know, don't we, nearly 800 people arrested so far, 118 behind bars. We're expecting to see many more in court today. How long will it take to process through all of these people?
Well, it's very difficult to say, but the courts are managing to sentence people very quickly if they plead guilty at the magistrates' court. We've seen those sentences being handed down by the judges. The difficulty may come if we have trials coming into the system, adding to the backlog. It's difficult to say how long that will take.
I guess, Tana, the issue is that, you know, every day we're being told by police forces across the country that they're still finding people, rounding them up and charging them. That just adds to the numbers that the courts have to process, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. And we have great technology these days with CCTV and body-worn camera footage coming from police officers at the scenes to process and go through, and also social media and phone evidence to look at when investigating these offences.
I know that you've previously said you don't want to have to extend court hours. If something like that doesn't happen, how much of a knock-on effect is there going to be? How long will the delays be for these cases and other unrelated cases?
Well, currently we've got a historic backlog at the moment, so cases are taking up to 18 months to come to trial, and that's for a number of reasons. Of course, part of that was the pandemic, part of that was that the backlog was extended prior to the pandemic arriving, and we also have fewer barristers than we've ever had for a very long time. Numbers are static at around 2,500 dedicated criminal barristers who both prosecute and defend, and therefore we know that last year a number of trials, 1,400 trials in fact, 252 of them rape trials, had to be adjourned through the lack of a barrister. So we are in difficult times. However, barristers will work as hard as they can to get these cases through the system, and that is what's happening at the moment. But cases that come in will have to wait, I'm afraid. There is a backlog. They will not be given priority. Defendants will have to wait for their trial, whether that is in custody or on bail.
Tana, you mentioned in custody. We've been reporting over the last few months about problems with prison spaces, that there's not enough room in our jails right now. How much of a consideration is that with all these prosecutions and potential sentences?
Well, the court will have to manage, and the court makes those decisions on bail regardless of whether there are prison places or not. They consider all the factors as to whether somebody needs to be remanded in custody because they can't be trusted on bail, or whether they can be admitted to bail with, for example, a tag and other conditions on their freedom. So the courts will make those decisions, and the prisons will have to make room.
Nazir, Afzal, we've seen, haven't we, all these, the prosecutions coming through. Do you think enough is being done to find and prosecute people who spread misinformation online?
Well, let me firstly agree with what Tana had to say, that there is an enormous backlog and resources are tight. However, the offenders, alleged offenders, have made it very easy because social media evidence is, you can just download it. Similarly, with all the messages people send, that's all been saved and can be used against people. What I keep saying to people is this will have a very long tail. There will be many, many cases. You might be waiting a year thinking, oh, everything's gone and nobody's interested in you, and suddenly you get a knock on the door, because the police will have to interrogate all of this evidence, and digital evidence can take some time to in effect get to be able to use in a courtroom. So rest assured, everybody and anybody, unfortunately, who has stupidly put stuff online will get a message from somebody at some point which they will welcome. So I think it's important to recognise that it will happen. It'll take time, but as Tana said, there's such a backlog in the system, it might take longer than otherwise.
Time. Talking about time, I mean, it's hard to believe it's only 2 weeks ago today, wasn't it, that the Southport attacks happened. 800 people arrested since then around the country, and 118 of them already behind bars. Does that time surprise you, that they've been able to get through so many pretty quickly?
No, because we've learned from the August 2011 riots that we had to deal with. We haven't brought in 24-hour courts as we did back then. However, we know there's a protocol in place. Lawyers know what's expected of them. Court staff, judges know what's expected of them too. So they can process these cases quite well. And most people have pleaded guilty. In fact, virtually everybody's pleaded guilty so far. So you can move straight to sentence. I think, as Tana quite rightly pointed out, there'll be people who will plead not guilty, and those trials will take some months, perhaps, to remedy, to reach. So I think it's not a surprise that hundreds have been dealt with so far. I think the numbers you've got are already outdated. I think there's been another 200 arrests overnight. So people will get the knock. They will then appear in court at some point, and then they will pay the penalty for what they've been doing for the last 2 weeks.
You talked about the 2011 riots and learning from that. Keir Starmer at the time was...
Yeah, he was my boss.
Prosecutor. He was your boss, yeah. I mean, how important do you think it is, or how significant is it, that he, as Prime Minister now, has been dealing with these latest bouts of disorder?
I think it's significant that he's obviously got experience of how to deal with widespread disorder as we had back in 2011. We've learned from that experience. That one, I remember, we were literally playing it by ear. We had no idea how we were going to manage it. We had to. Necessity. All the police stations were full. All the police vans were full. So we had, by necessity, to bring in night courts. We don't have to do that this time, it appears. As I said, it's a long tail for this one. So it'll take many months for some of these cases to finally be investigated and ultimately brought to justice. So, but Keir undoubtedly knows how to handle this, because we've done it.
And do you think more could be done right now to speed things up?
I don't. Well, Tana and I would both be calling for more resources. Yeah. It's as simple as that. There's no doubt about it. And of course, never forget, as touched on a moment ago, there's an impact on other cases. Other cases will be adjourned. Other cases, other victims, other suspects, other accused people will have to wait their turn. And we could do with more resources in criminal justice ultimately.
Tana, coming back to you, one big change from 2011 riots is that now, in some cases, the judge's sentencing of people happens on camera. You can watch it live on news channels. What kind of impact does that have, do you think? What kind of deterrent might that be on other people taking part in riots?
Well, absolutely very important that the public and also those that decide to get involved in criminal offending can actually see the sentences being handed down. So we are seeing that for the first time, and we'll see whether that has an impact. But people can know that the judges are dealing with these cases seriously, and in some cases, serious offences are being given very significant prison sentences.
And do you think that is one of the reasons why, apparently, fingers crossed, the disorder appears to have subsided? Do you think that's played a part?
Who knows? We don't know whether that is having an impact. One would hope so, that people realise that they can't get away with acting in this way on our streets. But we do need the resources into the criminal justice system to make sure that we can deliver justice in a timely fashion. And that's the issue here. We have seen that justice has been delivered in a timely fashion, but we don't know how long that can go on for. We need to invest in the people, particularly the Crown Prosecution Service and their prosecutors, but also the barristers and solicitors who deal with these cases day in, day out in the magistrates' courts, in the police stations and in the Crown courts.
Tana, Adkin and Nazir Afzal, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.